I pulled a bunch of my clutch covers off, trying to figure out why the needle bearing on the Husqvarna style saws tends to get plugged up with dust and lock up and not freewheel at an idle and cause the chain to run at an idle. I mentioned in my last video, I found that taking it apart, cleaning it, oiling it will make it free up for a little bit, but pretty soon it'll get locked up again, and grease seemed to keep it running longer, but eventually it would plug up again too. Here's one that is currently locked up right now. Hold on, I'm gonna zoom. And you can, it's kind of turning the piston over, and you can see it's kind of turning the clutch back there too. And if I put a little brake cleaner or oil or WD-40 or something in there, rinse it out, it'll free up. So there, now it's free up. It's not turning the saw over anymore. That's actually another thing. When they get stuck on, when they get locked up, they get actually hard to get off too. But anyway, I think I have found some differences, and I'm on the trail of what's causing it. I thought maybe clutch covers, but that's a Stihl 461 clutch cover and the extra clearance Husqvarna cover, and they're pretty much the same shape and dimensions. But so here's what I found. So first of all, the retainer washers are the same size. The Stihl is on the left in the back, but the Husqvarna has a gap where it sits down, and the Stihl is a machined washer that's flat on the back. And you can see that washer contacts, it's shiny, it's contacting around the outside of the spline drive here. And the other thing you can see is apparently the bearing is a slightly different design, and the Stihl bearing covers all this gap between the drum and the clutch right there. It probably keeps the dust out. And go over here to the John Sered, and we can see that the washer doesn't contact the outer of the spline drive here. It's maybe touching right here on the inside, and then this bearing is real open, has a lot of gap in here. So maybe I'll try adding, maybe make a machined thicker washer that fills up this gap more. If it's tighter, maybe I'll add an O-ring in the little there's a little pocket on the back side in that little curved area. Maybe add an O-ring there if maybe that corresponds to this diameter here, and keep the dust out. The other thing I found is the Husky pattern saws seem to have more slop vertically in the washer. I think the Stihl washer is a little thicker. This is my 2188, and it's the one I've had the most trouble with, actually cutting dry oak in the mountains. Dolmar 7900 over here. I don't think I've cut enough dusty stuff with this to really get know whether or not it's got a problem. But one thing I noticed, it has the stamped washer like the Husky does, but it's larger diameter. I'd be willing to bet it's maybe more resistant to dust. I've never had a problem with it, but I don't know if I've ever cut really nasty dusty stuff for an extended period of time. So anyway, that's kind of what I figured out. I've got to make some changes and do some experimenting and see if my theories are okay. So did a little more disassembly. We got the Stihl bearing on the left, and it's a plastic cage, and that plastic cage fits pretty snug and acts like a seal between the drum and the crankshaft. And it's also got fewer needles, and they're larger diameter, kind of a coarser setup. Maybe that handles dust better I think it mostly just keeps it out of there. The other thing I noticed is the still. I have not pulled one of these stills all the way apart. I've rebuilt Huskies from the ground up, but it almost seems like there's some sort of a cover plate on the back side of the clutch, because it's not all dusty in there like this Husqvarna that was locked up. John's Red. And which brings me to another point. That one is real dusty back there, and that one had the open style clutch with the holes, and so I thought maybe that might be a contributing factor. Maybe the dust is getting in from the back here. But the 2188 has a closed clutch, also the 2166, and I've had trouble with both of them. This one doesn't appear to have that much dust out there, but I think I may have cleaned it out and not run it in the dusty stuff much since then. Long story short, I think having that plate in the back there on the still and then having a closed clutch drum is probably better than an open clutch drum. But I think the main upside is the different cage style on the steel bearing, and also the washer fitting closer on the outside. One more addition to the video. I took the Dolmar apart, and that's the Dolmar washer there on the left, and we can see that it's flat all the way across here, so that this diameter here corresponds to this diameter here, and it keeps it covered all the way across there. It's actually the Husky drum, but go to the Dolmar actually would be better. So yeah, you can see that washer is touching all the way across the face. The bearing is very similar to the Husky, but I think it fits just the slightest bit closer. And the Dolmar, you see it's got the fine bearings in there, needles. But the Dolmar also seems to have this little sheet metal cover plate in the back, which keeps some of the dust out of that area just in general. So yeah, I think that's a lot of it. The Husky washer over here, I think somebody actually suggested that somewhere, that this diameter is too small, and so there's a gap right here, so you can see that shiny bit right there to the inside. That's the only place the washer touches, and it bounces around and probably lets dust get in there. One more thing, if you've got one of these saws, keep plenty of E-clips spares with you in your saw bag or tool bag or whatever. When I first got my 2166, it locked up and took it apart and lost the clip in the dust and dirt and chips and grass on the ground, and I only had 2 saws with me, and it was down to 1 saw, and actually managed to get it going again by getting a piece of baling wire and twisting it into that little groove right there, and got myself going again. But anyway, there's a little tip.